Now we take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. The nationwide strike by the National Union of Petroleum and Natural Gas Workers, NUPENG, continues after a meeting called by the Labour Minister, Mohammed Dingyadi, to resolve the issue ended in deadlock. At the end of negotiations that lasted almost 5 hours, the labour unions and representatives of Dangote refinery failed to reach an agreement over the issue of unionization in Dangote refinery. NUPENG President Williams Akporeha accused Dangote of attempting to enslave Nigerians and his workers through anti-labor practices. Leaders of organized labor, including the Nigerian Labour Congress and Trade Union Congress, said the representative of Dangote refinery stormed out of the meeting, leaving them with no choice but to continue with the strike.
The representative of the Dangote refinery walked out on the Honorable Minister and organized labor. Even when we bent backward to accommodate his uncompromising behavior, he still did what he had to do. So we are left with no option than to do the needful. The action continues. Whenever the representative of the Dangote refinery, when he sees the need for a meaningful dialogue, why not? We are ready.
We cannot stand and see an investor whose main purpose is to come and enslave Nigerians. You cannot take us back to the dark days of slavery. Nigerians has wished him so well than to enslave them. So it's unfortunate that at this point in time, we're having an investor whose main purpose is to say there can't be union in his establishment. He wants to monopolize the entire system and even monopolize workers alongside with them. This we said no. And it can't happen during our time.
Meanwhile, the Trade Union Congress of Nigeria has rejected the federal government's planned 5% tax on petroleum products with a warning that it will resist the policy. In a statement, TUC described the proposal as reckless and an act of economic wickedness against already overburdened Nigerians. According to the union, introducing another levy on petroleum products is to deliberately compound suffering, cripple businesses, and push millions of citizens deeper into poverty. TUC pointed out that workers and citizens are still reeling from the pains of subsidy removal, skyrocketing fuel prices, food inflation, and a collapsing naira. The union's leadership warns that it will resort to the option of a nationwide strike if the federal government goes ahead to implement the policy. Moving away, we go on to the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Honorable Tajuddin Abbas, who has raised strong concerns over Nigeria's growing public debt, warning that without transparent management and strict oversight, the burden could threaten the nation's economic stability and future. Abbas, who was represented at the 11th Annual Conference of the West Africa Association of Public Accounts Committees in Abuja by House Leader Julius Ihonwere, cautioned that Nigeria's debt-to-GDP ratio had hit 52%, exceeding the legal ceiling of 40%, and called on parliaments throughout West Africa to intensify their scrutiny of government borrowing to protect their citizens' future. He calls for a shift from external borrowing to domestic resource mobilization and intra-African financial solutions.
In Nigeria, recent available data indicate that our debt trajectory has reached a critical point, showing that, like many African countries, we continue to borrow internally and externally to fund capital and sometimes non-capital projects. This highlights the urgent need for a stronger oversight, transparent borrowing practices, and a collective resolve to ensure that tangible economic and social returns match every naira borrowed. Across Africa, debt levels have reached alarming proportions. By 2022, the continent's total public debt had reached $1.8 trillion, with external debts alone surpassing $1 trillion by 2023. Several countries are now in dangerous debt-to-GDP territory.
All right. It's a very rainy Tuesday morning here in Lagos, the island to be particular. Rufai, Dr. Bati, great to be on the show today. We have a number of stories before us today. Of course, the continuation of the Nupeng strike is still ongoing following a deadlock in the negotiation meeting that held yesterday. And also, an own goal, some might say, by the Speaker of the House of Representatives, even though he has come out to clarify his statements as it's the fashion of this administration, as we've seen in recent times. So, Rufai, your take on these stories, the TUC threatening a strike.
Okay, so my take is this. I think it was just yesterday we were talking about the fact that it's not fair when people say something and the next thing they're coming out to clarify afterwards, because we know what they initially said and we have to restate that as much as possible. What was played in the tape was obvious by Omobare. The debt level is alarming and we know it. It's over 50%. At a point in this country, not too far along, when Goodluck Jonathan was in power, the conversation was about debt to GDP ratio going to about 30% because we're about 25-26% then. All of a sudden, we have gotten from a place of 25-26% in a very short while, I bet 8-10 years, we are now over 50% debt to GDP ratio. So it shows that we actually have a debt problem. Yeah, the government is going to make the argument, oh, we can pay, it's not about collecting debt, but it's the fact that we can pay it. But the question is, please drill through the line item of what we're using the debt for. We are using it for recurrence. It's not for new capital development, for new capital projects. Look at the capital component of the budget. You see, that's why when the president was celebrating that, oh, we have raised revenue as regards non-oil, we've increased our revenue as regards non-oil. We've gotten about 15 trillion thereabouts, going up to 20 trillion. The debt service component of this budget cycle is over 14 trillion. Just debt service alone. And it shows we are still taking debt. The deficit for this year's budget is 13 trillion. So we have a big debt problem, and there's nothing that Abbas has said in the statement that we have not said before. One of his aides came out to say that it was fake news that they reported against him and everything. No, it was the speech that they read that people analyzed. He talked about judicious use of debt. The problem in Nigeria, we don't use debt judiciously. So I don't believe in even taking it in the first place in Nigerian context, because most of it is used to service excesses in the first place, in recurrent expenditure. So there is nothing that was said yesterday that has not been said. This attempt to now walk back things after you get a public reaction, I mean, it just smacks of hypocrisy in its entirety, and let's not support that. Another very big level of hypocrisy we are seeing today is from the unions. And this is the problem I have with unions. You don't do your due diligence. We make a lot of arguments that are not based on empirical facts. We make a lot of arguments that are based on emotion. The number one argument is this: joining a union is voluntary. And the question is, what has this union even done for us in the past? It was not the same union that went ahead to say that NNPC refinery is working. Did we hear from these unions? Didn't they allude to the facts? So afterwards, these same unions were the ones that negotiated with President Tinubu that part of the terms to be able to remove subsidy was to make the refineries work. The refineries worked for a bit. They didn't work again. We didn't see anything again. They have not said anything since then. The issues they ought to face, they will not face it. They are so concerned about an individual that brings about $20 billion to build a refinery. If it's so easy, everybody will have built a refinery. NNPC refinery will be working today. And he's also saying, let us deliver to the last mile. Let's get about 4,000 CNG trucks in. And he wants to have his drivers there. And he's saying he's not comfortable with engaging with the union because of the hitherto problems the unions have also caused in the past in this country. We all know it's not easy to deal with unions in this country. Let's stop deceiving ourselves, because we live in a lot of hypocrisy. And then the union is saying, no, you must unionize your staff, you must do this, you must do that. Yes, if you have practices, if you say the allegations you were pointing out yesterday that some people
so to check on fair,
check on fair. If you had that, you have an industrial court to be able to go to. That's why you have a national industrial court. But this attempt to force, to now blackmail all of us with a strike, it's a very funny one. Just like the TUC giving ultimatum on a law that had been signed into law. You can see the hypocrisy of the unions this morning. When we're all talking about the tax bill, and we're making the arguments, TUC didn't take out time to be able to read through the tax bill and see that, oh, there's a 5% surcharge here. Oh, it's not going to be in the interest of people, and fight against it. After it's been signed into law, probably somebody picks it up in the media and they report it. That's when TUC comes out and starts to make a hula balloon. Yes, I get the argument of TUC. It's going to cause a lot of harm. It's going to exacerbate inflation. Yes, I also get the argument of a lot of people that are saying that all the things President Tinubu condemned when he was in opposition are the things he does today. Because as of 2003, President Olusegun Obasanjo then wanted to introduce this petroleum tax for most of the same reasons that were talked about today. And President Tinubu, in fact, even threatened then, as Lagos State Governor, that he was going to take the government to court. There's another newspaper entry that talks about the fact that he went ahead to even rally some other governors in opposition to that petrol tax as of 2003. So you can now see the hypocrisy on the part of this government. You have removed subsidy, then you are adding a petroleum tax on the people. Shefe Pawani.
Do you want to kill us? That's the translation of
Yes.
that. Dr. Bati, you're alive, you're kicking, you're doing well in this economy. Your take on these stories this
Okay,
morning.
on fuel tax, I think that Taiwo Oyedele, who was chairperson of the tax and fiscal policy, has already answered the various questions that people bring up. Now, the first thing to note is that fuel tax is not new. It was already under the FEMA Act, Federal Road Maintenance Agency Act of 2007. Now, what they have done is to remove it from that FEMA Act and to harmonize it with the new tax policy. And that new tax policy is in the Chapter 7 of the new Nigerian Tax Act. It has not yet been gazetted. Some of the answers provided by Taiwo Oyedele is that the Fuel Tax Act of 5% has not yet happened. It may not happen in 2005. It may not happen in 2006. It may well happen when that Chapter 7 that I've just referred to under the new Nigerian Tax Act is gazetted. So people don't have to raise any fears about tax. However, what should be noted is that, look, people generally don't want to pay tax, whether it's in Nigeria or it's in the United Kingdom. After all, Angela Rayner just lost her position because of tax issues. So people will always find ways, based on advice. But the fuel tax in Nigeria is about consumption. It is a consumption tax. If you buy 100 liters of gasoline, you should expect you will pay 5% of a tax on gasoline. If you do 10%, 10 liters, you pay 5% on 10 liters. Where the problem is that Nigerians say, okay, we pay this tax. Government is looking for revenue. But what do you do with this revenue? The people who represent us that they are in government, do they pay fuel tax? They enjoy free fuel. They live in free houses. They eat free food. And then at the end of the day, you are always talking about civic responsibility. People have to pay tax. No, our leaders do not lead by example. So as for TUC saying we will go on strike, no, let them look at the details. It's not as if the tax is new. It's not new. But they can raise other questions about governance and responsibility and accountability. But to dress this up without looking at the details, that is what is wrong in my view. Now, what is the other issue? The Dangote meeting, yesterday. Now, the Dangote refinery is saying we have brought in 10,000 CNG-empowered trucks to distribute fuel to the end user to ensure efficiency. Petron says we are against this. NUPENG says we are against this. They've been joined by the NLC. They've been joined by the Trade Union Congress. What is the argument? The argument is that they are saying that the Dangote refinery with 10,000 trucks coming into the market is going to affect their own survival. Not just their own survival, it is also going to affect union fees, because they want Dangote drivers to join the union so that the NUPENG, NSC, TUC, they can collect, what do they call it, check-off dues. You know, all these union leaders, they are very robust, pot-bellied, you know, fat-feeding, you know, officials. But Dangote says, no, this is a new dispensation. We will take good care of our staff. There is even an association that they have created in the Dangote refinery. I think it's called the Truck Driving Association of Nigeria, whatever. So the truck driving, whatever, DTAN, you know, something like that. Saying that, look, under labor regulations, you can join freely, you can exit freely. So that within Dangote refinery, they have their own union. And that union does not have to be affiliated to either NUPENG or NLC or TUC. Now, yesterday, the Nigerian government intervened because NUPENG, Petron, you know, all their associates said they were going to go on strike. The meeting ended in a deadlock because the Dangote team refused to sign the conditions provided by NUPENG and Petron. So that's where we are at this moment. But I think it's a good thing that for the first time in a long time, the Nigerian government stepped in almost immediately to try to address the situation. We have had situations here where resident doctors served notice, the Tinubu government did nothing. Where nurses and midwives served notice, they waited till the last moment. But in this particular case, maybe perhaps because of the strategic value of oil and gas, we saw the federal government immediately, you know, stepping into the fray and saying, no, we have to address this problem. There was one other topic that I would have loved to just say a word about.
So the striker, borrowing, debt to GDP ratio.
Oh,
Nigeria's debt.
The Honorable Tajuddin Abbas,
yes,
or Speaker of the House of Representatives, number 4 citizen in the country. Now, what I don't understand about that narrative is that, look, public officials, they are invited to events, they say something, the statement is recorded, the statement is transcribed, it is in the public domain, and then they come around and say, I didn't say so. In this particular case, Honorable Tajuddin Abbas, Speaker of the House of Representatives, was represented, we are told, in one account, by the House Majority Leader, Professor Julius Ihonbere. Professor Julius Ihonbere is a very distinguished scholar, one of the leading lights in political science scholarship in this country. So he will not go there and just talk. No, even if he's speaking extempore, you can be sure. Those of us who were the students of that generation, we know the people. We know that it's a naturally intelligent man. So he will not go there and misrepresent the speaker. But now the speaker said, no, I didn't criticize revenue to GDP ratio. I didn't say Nigeria is owing $149.49 billion and that 43% of that is from external borrowing. The balance is from domestic borrowing. Okay, no problem. But what even riles me is the incompetence of the spokesperson for the speaker. In the statement that I read, the spokesperson for the honorable speaker does not even know who represented the speaker at that particular event, which was an event of West African public accountants discussing transparency, integrity, and all of that. So he even gave a different name. So this confusion is typical, is characteristic, is habitual. Because public officials, they should check their scripts. What you don't want to say, don't say it. Once you say it and it's out there, it will be documented. But I understand the Honorable Tajuni Abbas, number 4 citizen, he doesn't want to be seen to be antagonizing the government. The ordinary citizens like us will say, well, but even if he criticizes borrowing for consumption purposes, he will be seen to be doing his job. Yeah, the job of the parliament is to call government to action. It's not for, the Speaker of the House to be seen to be a boy of the President of Nigeria.
You said the job of this parliament is to call government to action? I mean, this parliament?
That is supposed to be their job.
Unfortunately,
consistently, they haven't quite done that. In fact, I'm surprised the Honorable Speaker is criticizing actions that they themselves, when the President came, it was in November of last year, to present, his plans to further borrow. And most of them, when he comes into the House, whenever he has the opportunity to come into the Assembly, they first of all welcome him with, "On your mind, we shall stand." So it is difficult to have oversight and represent the interests of the Nigerian people when the executive and legislature are in bed together. There's nothing wrong with that sometimes when they work together, when the president has the ears of the Assembly or the Senate, because sometimes it makes some good policies move very quickly or some good legislation move very quickly. But it shouldn't take away their responsibility to do their job, which is oversight. So if Honorable Abbas is talking about, through that speech, even though he's come out to clarify his stance, that because the fact it is at a very high, if you compare to previous administrations, under the Obasanjo administration, when it was able to get the Paris Agreement and debt was certainly under 30%, the Jonathan administration, under the Buhari administration, who took us further into more debt. But this administration has almost, has hit the ceiling at over 50%. As stipulated in the law, it should be at around 40%. So if he's saying that it is high, then the National Assembly in itself is complicit, because it means, or it is a testament that they have failed in their duty of oversight and in approving some of these loans by the presidency. So I'm hoping that by seeing this and seeing the economic impact on Nigeria, they will retrace their steps and actually do the job for which they were elected to do, which is to ensure that they are able to have oversight functions for the executive. Now, moving away from that, I want to talk about Nupeng and the strike, as well as TUC's intended strike, and draw some lessons or perhaps some action points from there. So yesterday we talked about the Nupeng and Dangote strike and the issues. Let me lay them bare. Some of the things that the union is accusing Dangote for, or what they are not happy about and why they've embarked on this strike, is number one. They say that by importing these 10,000 CNG trucks, the Dangote group is going to take food from the table of some of the truck owners. Now, let me paint a picture. Currently, the truck owners have about 2,000 trucks on the road. Dangote is looking to bring 10,000 CNG powered trucks. Nevertheless, it's important to understand that these trucks would mean that Dangote is creating about 20,000 jobs, because at least 2 drivers per truck. So, with regards to creating jobs, tick for them, but the business owners on the other side are saying that you're coming to take our business, you're going to crowd the market and crowd us out. Do they have a point there? Absolutely. But yesterday, that's why we made, Rufai and Dr. Bati made a case for a free market to competition in the market space, and to ensure that if you're able to run your business side by side, another organization, we run a free market economy in Nigeria. So that's one argument for that. The other argument they talk about is the asking, or the MOU, or the signing of contract by Dangote to the workers that they should not join a union. Now, I reached out to parties involved, and what they said was that they'd actually come back to think about the fact that joining a union by workers is voluntary. And so if their workers want to join a union, they are free to do so. And if they want to desist from joining a union, they are also free to do so. It's about choices. And the unions respect of the workers' choices. What I mentioned yesterday is as enshrined in the Nigerian Constitution, that workers have a right of association, to freedom of association, and can choose or decide, or should be enabled to choose or decide whether they want to join a union or not. What would not be a good look from the Dangote side of things is for them to mandate their workers not to join external unions if they do want to do so. And of course, that brings up questions around whether or not the unions are representing them well. How many times have you heard of the unions really standing up for the Nigerian people, the disconnect between the leaders of the union and the people that they actually represent, whether or not it's any benefit to them and whether or not they should join the unions. But it should be the individual's right to choose. Now, there's a few lessons when you think about this from the Visionscape story in Lagos State. Many of us might remember the Visionscape versus the PSPs, threatening the status quo. Now, one of the things that or some of the things that were the challenges was timing, communication and stakeholder management, and of course, economic impact. When Visionscape came on ground, they were meant to revolutionize waste collection in Lagos State. And by so doing, the PSPs thought that they were going to collect their daily bread by bringing in these new and modern trucks. However, what they didn't reveal was that they were built into the structure or the system of Visionscape. And sometimes, and of course we all know the story of how they sabotaged the process, and Visionscape is no more today. Visionscape is no more today. What happens many times is that when there's no sufficient or efficient stakeholder management, especially for the people who are managing the terrain already, we see an intentional sabotage. And this might just be the case of what's happening in Dangote. So what I would suggest this morning is perhaps going to the negotiation table and see how it can be a win-win situation for the truck owners who are concerned about their daily living being affected or their businesses being affected, and Dangote, who are coming in to revolutionize the industry and to bring modern technology and even attract more investment into the sector. And it's the same thing as well when we talk about the TUC saying that the tax is on Nigerians very heavy. Absolutely. But I want to point out the fact that it is not yet in effect. The Minister of Finance, as mentioned in that law, is going to state at a later date when it will come into effect. So what I would want the TUC to do this morning is to ensure that there are certain thresholds that have been met in the interest of the Nigerian people before the 5% tax is introduced. At the end of the day, the 5% tax is supposed to go into road infrastructure and to build infrastructure in Nigeria and for the benefit of road users at the end of the day. So these are some of the things I think are very important. Timing, stakeholder management, communication, and economic impact.